Should Nebraska take a transfer portal quarterback this summer? We get into it coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the show. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, on YouTube as well. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're brought to you today by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150 win or lose. Head to FanDuel.com/locked on to get started.
All right, good morning. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, here with Connor Happer from 1620 The Zone in Omaha. Connor, how are you on this rainy Tuesday in Nebraska?
Yeah, little rainy this morning. Got to actually, you know what? Got to be in close proximity with Matt Rhule last night because he popped up at the Zach Bryan concert at the end, and you know he does a song. He does one of his most popular songs at the end. It's like a 20-minute version of Revival, and Matt Rhule came out and ripped off a couple verses, pumped up the crowd, threw the bones, got out of there. It was a good time.
Mr. New York City, he's just a little bit of everything, right? I mean,
yep.
Getting up on stage, donning the 1890 hat, stepping to the mic. He just plays to his people, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's a chameleon. He can kind of, I mean, he's been a Texas guy, and Texas loved him. Midwestern, I think, works well on him, and he's still got the city guy in him too. So yeah, he spends
more time in Omaha than he does in Lincoln. I'm starting to think that.
I know he's here all the time. He's going to concerts. I mean, I said to my wife before, it was like, I wonder if he's going to bring out anybody. And I said, well, if he needs somebody, Matt Rhule's always there. So
I'm sure he got to one of his favorite restaurants while he was in town too. He likes to talk about that. But
I would imagine
today, Connor, is 4 months from the season opener. Well, not exactly 4 months because there are not 31 days in April, but we are as close to 4 months from the season opener, UTEP invading Memorial Stadium, as we can get. And it's also the last day for undergraduates to enter the transfer portal. So by midnight tonight, if you're not in and you're not a grad transfer, then sorry, it's going to be a while unless your coach leaves or there's some other extenuating circumstances. Chief Borders entered the portal for Nebraska. He is a graduate in 3 years. Congratulations to Chief on graduating early. We'll talk more about that in the second segment of this episode. But I want to pose this question, and speaking of Matt Rhule, I've got some Matt Rhule audio and video if you're watching us on YouTube to play here in a second. But you hinted at it or you suggested it, asked the question in the open, should Nebraska take a transfer portal quarterback? And after the spring game, I asked Matt Rhule if the Huskers, upon seeing Dylan Raiola, Heinrich Harburg, Daniel Kalen, Luke Longvall, Jack Wosch do their things in the red-white game, if Nebraska was set at that position. And here is his answer. There that like you have everything you need at the quarterback position?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I would never say that. I'm sorry. Yeah, I would say we would always look for quarterback. I mean, if there's a quarterback that comes along, we would always take another quarterback. I think we have our starter sitting in that room. Let me say that. Okay, I think we have three guys that we believe in. But if a young player comes along or a depth player comes along, we certainly. I don't go looking in the portal, but I also am not stupid when things come across to us. We're always, Scott Fitter was the GM when I was in Carolina. He used to say from the Seahawks, we're in on every trade. And so he just would explore everything. So, but I think we have quarterbacks capable of winning for us. And I think the quarterback play significantly improved from last season.
All right. He wants to be in on every trade. What do you think? What'd you think of that?
Well, I think it was good to hear him lay it out. I don't know that we've heard it quite that. We thought that was the case, but he had it kind of down to a pretty simple one. He said, I think the starter's in the room back there, which is obviously the truth. And we know which one it is. He wasn't any more specific than that, but we have a pretty good idea, I think, at this point.
He knows, his teammates know, but we're not going to talk about it until August.
which is fine. And so for him to say like out loud, like, yeah, we're all, if something comes along, I'm not really actively looking, but if something comes along and if it's the right situation, and wouldn't that have to be kind of what they ended up with? Because I think it's hard to, it's not like you're going to throw a bunch of NIL money at a guy out of the portal and say, hey, come be our starter next year. Like, no, that's not the situation they're in. And in all likelihood, well, in definite hood, Nebraska's starting quarterback is going to be a freshman. So that's another hard sell for a guy who's coming in who wants to stay for a couple of years or not stay for a couple of years. So it's got to be the right guy in the right situation. They don't seem, I don't know, you could, Mitch, like the tone there. They don't seem adamant in doing it one way or the other, but it feels like if the right guy falls in the right place, they might end up taking one.
Yeah. I looked through the portal on Monday in preparing for this conversation, and shockingly, there are not a lot of candidates out there who I saw as players who might want to come in and provide depth behind a true freshman star.
Not really how it goes.
Yeah. I don't know what they're going to find. And maybe on this last day here on Tuesday, April 30th, before the portal closes, magically someone will appear who just like fits what Nebraska needs. I'm not banking on that. So absolutely, if you could find a guy, either a veteran player who could be kind of another voice in the room to help with the transition to college for Nebraska's two true freshmen, especially Dylan Rhule, who's going to be asked to do a lot in 2024, or if you could find a young guy who provides depth, but really there are a bunch of young guys in there. There's players who are want to move up from the group of five into a Power 5 spot, maybe have started some games at a lower level. They're looking to start at the next level or be in a position maybe where they're behind a senior. Yes. And then they can start pretty quick. So their work is cut out for them to find the right fit.
Yeah, I don't see it, honestly. It seems really, really difficult. I mean, I thought about it a lot, and I think maybe the most likely situation is if a guy is, maybe in his 4th, 5th, 6th year, and he wants to come in and he knows that football's probably over for him after that, and kind of fall into a mentorship kind of role, and also serve as the backup and all that stuff. That feels, I don't know, possible. Like you said, Mitch, I mean, you looked at it. Is there many guys that fit that are sitting in the portal right now? Right. And so
jumped off the page. Not that jumped off the page. I mean, I was looking for a couple things. I was looking first for some older players who, for whatever reason, were moving on, maybe wanted to get into coaching. It's hard to know just from looking at the names and the schools that they have attended, what their mindset is. And then I was looking for guys who perhaps could have had a connection to somebody on the Nebraska staff. Like, are you from Texas? Were you a prospect when this coaching staff was primarily at Baylor? Did you play for somebody on this staff? And nobody jumped off the page at me. So there will be more. There will be more portal entries today, I think, including from Nebraska, and there will be some quarterbacks elsewhere from out there around the country. There's a lot of eyes on Ohio State right now. Not that Ohio State is going to send a quarterback to Nebraska, but Ohio State's got like 3 or 4 5-star quarterbacks on the roster coming out of spring, and they're not all going to stick around. There's some talk that Lincoln Kienholz, who's from just north of Nebraska in southern South Dakota, could enter the portal. And at one time, he was viewed as somebody who might be a target for Nebraska, but not now, not with Dylan Rhule. And then Devin Brown is another guy who could enter the portal for Ohio State, and we'll see. Yeah, maybe there's another Big Ten destination for him, but I don't think it's Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah, Nebraska is kind of paying the price for having a 5-star freshman quarterback. It's a price that's well worth it, obviously, but this is part of the deal. I think it's going to be hard to sell anybody else on the job.
A year from now, I think the sky is kind of clear on opportunities that might exist to get a quarterback through the portal, because if this thing goes according to plan and Dylan Raiola is the quarterback for Nebraska in 2024, has a strong freshman season, then you can start to see light at the end of the tunnel. Like, okay, he's got 2 years left to be in this program. And if you're a young quarterback, it's not as long, just like psychologically, it's not as long of a wait before you might get an opportunity. So, and maybe some things clear out more in Lincoln. It depends on who Nebraska gets as a recruit this year. And that's a different discussion that we'll talk about later this week is how hard is it to recruit a quarterback out of high school when you have a freshman who appears to be at the level of Dylan.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different areas to the portal that we can kind of get into, and we'll break some of that down this week on the show. All right. When we come back, we'll get into the departure of Chief Borders from yesterday and a little bit more when we come back on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
Mitch Sherman here for Gametime. Please support all of our sponsors here at the Locked On Nebraska podcast. You've heard us talk about Gametime, the app that makes your Major League Baseball experience even better. And I'm looking forward, now that we're almost in May, one more day and we're in May, and there's some Major League Baseball, hopefully on my horizon very soon, whether it's in Kansas City or wherever else I might get this summer. We'll talk about that more as the summer goes on, but wherever I go, Gametime is going to make my experience better. It's now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets easier and faster because prices on the Gametime app go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You have all-in pricing, no fees at checkout, deals for specific zones in the stadium, and flexible customer service. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. You can create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Check it out at gametime.co and download the Gametime app today. Lowest price guaranteed.
All right. And of course, for the FanDuel Sportsbook as well, we are rolling on with the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs. Baseball, as Mitch mentioned, is in full swing, rolling along into the month of May now. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed, $150 win or lose. So, we could take a look at the NBA tonight. The Knicks are trying to close out the Sixers. If that happens, I will laugh very hard, and that'll be very funny for me. And a couple other NBA games going on tonight. The Nuggets have moved on. My Denver Nuggets have moved on to round 2 already. Should be a deep series with the Mavs and the Clippers. So there's some good stuff going on in the NBA. The NHL is always nuts. And then, of course, Major League Baseball as well. Any way you want to bet on it, check out the FanDuel Sportsbook. Once again, $150 guaranteed win or lose. And you can do it all in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Head to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet an automatic win. That is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, as we continue deeper into the world of the portal, talked about the quarterback side, which is sort of the entry point for everything. Nebraska had a mildly surprising portal entrance yesterday with Chief Borders, who was talked about pretty glowingly just last week by Matt Rhule. He had, of course, transferred here from Florida and played 2 years there, and then won here at Nebraska last year, where he didn't play much, but seemed to be a guy, according to Coach Rhule, who's coming on strong. Mitch, what was your kind of immediate reaction when you heard the news?
I wasn't shocked. I feel like I can say this. It's a new world in college football, and I can tell you that players have agents today. They're allowed to have agents, and agents work on behalf of players. And as fate would have it, I heard from Chief Borders' agent last week, because Chief's agent wanted to get a story out in the public about how well Chief was doing in Nebraska's spring football practice. That's not generally the way that my line of work goes. In college, when there are when there are players who are doing well, there's a system in place that we generally still abide by, and it's going through the university. Now, when they graduate or when they're done with their eligibility, the agents, they come out of the woodwork, and you hear a lot from agents about trying to promote their players ahead of the NFL draft or ahead of whatever it is that they might have next down the road if they're trying to become a free agent signee. So the fact that Chiefs agent was working some angles while he was still at Nebraska with a couple years of eligibility left, it raised my antenna a bit, and not entirely shocked to see that maybe that was the work of someone who was trying to raise his NIL profile because there was some shopping going on out there. So look,
wow, that's amazing.
This is just college football now. I mean, it's a different world than it was 12 months ago or 24 months ago. And he was
man. So I mean, Rhule talking about it last week. I mean, that's tied to that, right?
Well, yeah, you're an agent and you hear the head coach come out in a media availability and say this guy's been one of the bigger surprises or bigger improvements of the entire spring at Nebraska. And you're an agent, your eyes light up, and you think, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for him to go in the portal and make some money. I don't see Chief as a future NFL player. Now, he's got an NFL personality, and he's got he could go on TV and be the host of, his own show, and maybe he will, or do whatever he wants to do. Hey, Chief doesn't need an agent. Chief could be his own agent. That's how vibrant he is when he gets in front of people. But that's neither here nor there on this discussion. And if you're an agent, you hear that from Matt Rhule, and you think opportunity. Not to say that Chief was going to stay at Nebraska if Rhule hadn't done that. And I think it works both ways. Sometimes if you have a player and you're Matt Rhule or you're Nebraska and you think, well, maybe there's a chance we're going to lose this guy and we'd like to keep him through the spring, you go and say something nice about him in the last media opportunity of the spring. Hey, Chief's been doing a great job. They put Chief up, and he did interviews last week. He came to the podium and spoke, and some of that on Nebraska's behalf could have been an attempt to throw a little love his direction and hoping that he would stay. So there's a lot always going on behind the scenes, and never a surprise when you see somebody go in the portal, to be honest.
Hey, Mitch, you know what the best promotion is probably for a guy who's trying to get out his name, if he's going into the transfer portal? It's probably like playing football and having like real life production on the field. So I applaud the efforts. I really do. I respect that a lot, but I don't know. We'll see where that one lands. That's pretty funny stuff.
I mean, there's nothing sinister about what's happening. If we would have had this exact conversation a couple of years ago, it would have been like, oh my gosh. But that's just the way it is today. And that's the only time I heard from a third party representative in that kind of a way this spring. Not to say that there aren't others that are other situations that are similarly unfolding at Nebraska, right here under our nose. And I think there'll be more. I think we've got 24 hours left or less than that. The news on the portal, it tends to leak out after the players file their paperwork, could be 12 hours after. So we might still hear some news on Wednesday about transfer portal entries, but I don't think Chief will be the only one from Nebraska here this week.
Yeah. And that doesn't have to be the worst thing in the world either. We talk about the numbers all the time. That really doesn't matter, but they'll lose a couple who probably wouldn't have contributed much this year, or maybe would have contributed a little bit. And then I think they're probably at the point now, a year deep into this, where they're just better equipped to handle any sort of loss of a player. So I'm not too worried about what's going to happen over the next 24 hours.
Yeah, it's plug and place with the departure of Chief Borders. He was potentially a valuable piece for Tony White and the Nebraska defense, playing that jack linebacker spot. He could switch between the edge rusher and jack linebacker. And Nebraska has Prince Will, who can also do that, and he missed a good portion of this spring or all of this spring while healing up from injury. Nebraska has Jamari Butler, who's played both of those positions and led the team in sacks last year, and I think is settled in more as an edge rusher. And then there are young players in the program, like Willis McGahee IV, who's here as an early enrollee, like Dylan Rogers. We've heard a ton about Vincent Shavers. We talked about him on the show last week, another early enrolling true freshman. He fits somewhere at that linebacker mix. Not sure if it's Jack, if he could grow into the Jack spot, if he's more of an inside guy now. So when one guy leaves, in the case of Chief Borders here, it creates opportunities for more down the road. And that's where Nebraska wants to be. You want to be in a spot where if you lose somebody, you have adequate replacements. That's where NIL helps you, because you have more than 85 scholarship caliber, scholarship worthy players on the roster. You don't want to be in a spot like Nebraska was in at wide receiver last year. And at linebacker, they're fortunate with Borders going away that they're not in that spot, and they have good, promising talent behind him.
Yeah. They're definitely starting to make that depth piece show up a little bit more, which is super positive. And, coming back, Mitch, on the other side, we'll talk about the defense a little bit as well. Something that we haven't got into after the spring game.
The forgotten group on the Nebraska football team, amazingly, after the season that Tony White engineered last year. So, question for you here as we finish this segment 2. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch now to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, quick timeout, because we got to talk about Monopoly Go. And you're probably thinking you guys talk about Monopoly Go all the time, but there's just so much good stuff going on at Monopoly Go. You can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build each other's boards. And the more you win together, there's a real sense of community on Monopoly Go. The more awesome prizes you unlock. You can get unique stickers to trade, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. You got emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings, or
I know you're all about the emojis, right?
I am. And you pull off like if I pulled off a heist against you, Mitch, I would send you a crying, laughing emoji. And I think you'd be really mad about that. You'd send me the mad emoji. Monopoly Go features constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There are mini games like digging treasures even, and there's always new events that can help you win big. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and download it now. That is Monopoly Go, free on the Google Play or the App Store.
Okay, third and final segment in the Locked On Nebraska show on a Tuesday. We're going to get more into quarterback talk tomorrow, because that's what we do. We talked some in the first segment about Nebraska's needs at the QB position. Today on The Athletic, you can check it out. I've got an article about Dylan Rhule, imagine that, and Nebraska's needs to manage expectations over the next 4 months, which won't be all that easy. But please check that out for more on Dylan and the expectation that he's facing as Nebraska goes into this next phase of the offseason. I want to finish this show by posing a question, Connor, about the Nebraska defense. And we heard all about the offense and the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. We talked about Ja'Cory Barney and that group a bit on the Monday show. So I wonder, is there any reason to be concerned about the defense based on how the spring came to an end? And I will say that noting that in the scrimmage on April 20th, a week before the spring game, it was filled with big plays. Matt Rhule said it was a dominant performance by the offense, and we haven't heard from Tony White since that time, since before that time. The last week of practice, he was not scheduled for interviews. I'm guessing he's not real happy at this moment.
Yeah. Cause for concern? No, there's nothing that I'm really, worried about in particular. I will say this though, just like year over year. I mean, this is how we talk about it with the offense. Year 1 to year 2, it's going to be dramatically improved. They have have a better quarterback. They have, they're going to turn the ball over less. Some of that is by osmosis. Some of that is because of better quarterback play and the type of offense they're going to be running. So like, that's just going to get dramatically better. They have better playmakers, all that stuff. The defense has a lot of the same pieces. They're obviously trying to take that next step and get more takeaways and stuff like that. But they did have the thing last year where, you're throwing the 3-3-5 at people and you're trying to kind of, confuse them and bring looks from different directions. And Nebraska still doesn't have like a true like go-to pass rusher that the Rhule talked about, rushing with 4 and how key that is. I don't know if it's a cause for concern, but like maybe they are like a candidate for regression, a mild regression a little bit. That's not, I know that sounds sort of alarming, but it shouldn't be. I mean, they ended up being really, really good last year. And some of it is based on that kind of riding, pendulum, the scale of offense, defense. How good are you here? How good can you be here? It kind of goes back and forth. So they might take a step back, but I wouldn't bank on it. And I don't think that makes them a worse team because of how much better the offense is going to be.
Yeah, I think it still has the potential to be a better defense. Now, I don't think statistically it's going to look better. Right. It was a top 15 defense a year ago, top 10 in yards allowed per play, which is something that is important to, an important way to put every team on an even scale. You can't really necessarily compare yards per game from one team to the next because that's so dependent on the offense and how much the offense holds the ball and what style of offense you play, what kind of games you get into. But yards per play are a good gauge, and Nebraska was top 10 nationally. And I would say that's in part because of the Big Ten West and just how offensively challenged so much of that division was. And there is no more Big Ten West. So the numbers might look a little bit different, a little skewed, but I think the defense as a whole, despite anything that happened in the last week and a half of spring practice, will be a better group. Just 1 through 11, actually like 1 through 25 will be a better group. We did not see Ty Robinson or Nash Hutmaker play in the spring game or the last scrimmage of the spring before the spring game. And those guys are the anchors. They hold that defense together at the front. They make the 3-3-5 go because of the amount of attention that they're required for that an offense needs to pay to them. And they'll be there and they're going to be standouts for Tony White and Terrence Knight in that group. So you put them in, it's a different situation. Also, I don't think Tony did much at all on Saturday as far as blitzing and then sending different looks at these quarterbacks. Couldn't hit the quarterbacks. There was very little chaos, which is a staple of Nebraska on defense. The biggest concern that I have coming out of April, I would say, is what's going to happen now at that cornerback position opposite Tommy Hill. Because Nebraska felt good about Bly Hill, the transfer from an FCS school in Pennsylvania, and he went down in the spring game. So is it Jeremiah Charles? Do you look at Mario Buford, the true freshman? I mean, Charles has got all the athleticism in the world. Do you have to now go to Malcolm Hartzog and say, hey, you've played this spot. Can you come back and help us out? Or do you keep him at safety? So that to me is a little bit of a concern and something they're going to have to figure out if Bly Hill is not ready to go in August.
Yeah, I don't think they mind playing young guys. And like you said, it's like we said earlier, it's kind of like a next man up type of deal, but it is scary. I mean, considering, Bly Hill was the guy who kind of emerged from the pack out of that group that was a totally open competition in the spring and, seemed to grab a hold of it and then got hurt in the spring game. It was just super unfortunate that way. Yeah, I have some concerns about that as well. But I do think like the defensive line, and its strength should offset some of that, especially and for the record, like I don't totally mind a whole bunch of middling Big Ten quarterbacks trying to throw it around against Nebraska's defense a little bit. Like that's not the worst plan in the world. So as long as they're strong up front, they should be fine. I wonder before we get out of here, I wonder like about another, you have a year of tape on the defense now. Like, I know they were vanilla in the spring game, but people, other teams don't care about that. You have a whole year where they've seen it now and how they reacted to it last year. And so teams will come up with a better plan against that this year. So that might offset some of it as well. But as far as like their coach, obviously, very good, and Tony White. And then, a lot of the personnel is the same from last year. So there's very, very few concerns on that side of the ball, Mitch. Anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And just one final thought on what you said there about the tape. Something playing to Nebraska's advantage is look around the Big Ten and the 18 teams. Not only do you have 4 new teams, you've got new coordinators on the defensive and offensive sides all over the place in the Big Ten coming up in 2024. So I think that's something that helps Nebraska, because while there is tape on Nebraska, there also is a lot of studying that's going to need to be done around the league in order to try to get up to speed on the new schemes and systems that teams are running on both sides of the ball. So that plays to Nebraska's advantage just a bit.
All right. We will be back tomorrow. We got some more stuff for you, and we'll be back the rest of the week. We're here for you every single day, and that's a good reminder, a good time to bring up the Locked On first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On and our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today available now on the free Fire TV channels app.